Game of Thrones Season 7 finally confirmed one of the biggest secrets in the series. The father of Jon Snow is Rhaegar Targaryen. Rhaegar died some 15 years before the main story, but he's an important and mysterious character connected to prophecy and political plots, with complex relationships with Lyanna Stark and Elia Martell. Rhaegar's actions shape the course of the story, with the fall of House Targaryen in Robert's Rebellion and the birth of Jon Snow to the fate of Westeros in its fight against darkness. So let's work out who Rhaegar was and what he means for the future of Thrones. Before Tommen and Joffrey and Robert, the king of Westeros was Aerys Targaryen. Prince Rhaegar was Aerys' son and heir, and he was the brother of Daenerys and Viserys. Rhaegar was married to Elia Martell, the sister of Oberyn and Doran, and they had 2 young children, Rhaenys and Aegon. But one day, at a tournament at Harrenhal, Rhaegar passed over his wife Elia and crowned Lyanna Stark, the sister of Ned Stark, as Rhaegar's Queen of Love and Beauty, when Lyanna was promised to marry Robert Baratheon. So the Baratheons, Starks and Martells were mad about this, and the next year things got worse when Rhaegar ran off with Lyanna, and Robert started a war to get her back. King Aerys was killed by Jaime Lannister. Daenerys and Viserys fled east. Elia, Rhaenys and Aegon were killed by the Mountain and Armory Lodge. Lyanna died giving birth to Jon Snow, and Rhaegar was killed in battle by Robert. The Targaryen dynasty, who had ruled Westeros for hundreds of years, was over. Robert Baratheon became the new king. 15 years later, the first book begins, and it's a mystery exactly what happened with Rhaegar and Lyanna. King Robert says that Rhaegar abducted and raped Lyanna, but in Season 7 we learn that that's a lie, and that Rhaegar and Lyanna were in love. There's this whole thing in the books hinting that Lyanna rode in the Harrenhal tournament in disguise as a mystery knight, and Rhaegar was sent to go find her, which was probably how they met. So they fell in love, secretly got married, and ran away to this tower in Dorne to have sex all day until Rhaegar was forced to the war with Robert, where he died with Lyanna's name on his lips, while Lyanna died in childbirth. It's a tragic love story, but it's also something more complicated, because Rhaegar risked everything with Lyanna. He not only left his wife and children, he started a war that destroyed his family and his kingdom and his life. And the reasons behind this go deep into politics and prophecy and the fate of Westeros. When Rhaegar took Lyanna, he knew he was risking conflict. Like, we're told in the show that the war was built on this lie that Rhaegar kidnapped Lyanna. But even if people knew the truth that Lyanna loved Rhaegar, they'd still be mad. Because this was not a society that let women choose who they could love. Lyanna was a political tool that the Baratheons and Starks were using to build a marriage alliance. By taking Lyanna, Rhaegar ruined those plans. He also insulted Dorne by rejecting his wife Elia. So Rhaegar had pissed off 3 of the most powerful families in the realm, which is never a good idea, but it was especially dangerous at that time. The political situation was super delicate, because the king, Aerys Targaryen, was insane. By the time of the tourney at Harrenhal, it was well known that Aerys was mad. He was violent and paranoid, obsessed with fire, burning alive people he thought were his enemies. He was a terrible king, and lots of powerful people wanted him gone. Tywin Lannister had beef with Aerys and said he'd prefer Rhaegar as king. It's hinted that the Baratheons, Starks, Arryns, and Tullys were forming an alliance against Aerys. Marrying Lyanna was part of that. And Rhaegar himself was apparently plotting against his father. We're told that the whole tourney of Harrenhal began as a plot so Rhaegar could conspire with the great houses to force his dad into retirement. So Rhaegar was playing the political game. He knew how dangerous things were, and he was carefully scheming to work with the houses to peacefully replace the Mad King. Until he suddenly threw that all away by publicly crowning Lyanna, insulting the very families who could have been allies against Aerys. Then by running off with Lyanna, he set off the chain of events causing war. The Starks came angry to King's Landing, the Mad King killed those Starks and demanded the heads of Robert and Ned. That was when the war began, and it didn't seem to have much to do with the lie of an abduction. It was caused by the tension between King Aerys and the Great Houses, which Rhaegar not only failed to fix, but made much worse by taking Lyanna. Why did Rhaegar take such a terrible risk at such a dangerous time? To understand why, we need to understand Rhaegar from the very beginning. We're told that Rhaegar was good at everything that he did. He was smart and a great warrior, he played the harp, he was beautiful, he was able, determined, deliberate, dutiful, and single-minded. Jorah calls Rhaegar the last dragon, and says he fought valiantly, nobly, and honourably before he died. Cersei, as a child, had a big crush on Rhaegar and hoped to marry him. Jon Connington also loves Rhaegar, his silver prince, and Rhaegar was popular with the common people, who cheered him at tournaments. So, on the surface, Rhaegar seems like a golden boy who everyone loved, but Barristan says that no one truly knew Rhaegar. He had a private, secretive side, a melancholy, and a sense of doom, which was related to Rhaegar's birth at Summerhall. Summerhall was a Targaryen palace in the south. Rhaegar's great-grandfather, King Aegon V, brought his family there to celebrate the impending birth of Rhaegar. But Aegon also apparently tried to perform a fiery magic ritual to hatch some dragon eggs, and the fire got out of control and killed King Aegon and much of his family. It was during this tragedy at Summerhall, amongst the flames, that Rhaella Targaryen gave birth to Rhaegar. He was born in grief, and that shadow hung over him all his days. But it wasn't just grief that haunted Rhaegar, it was destiny. The Targaryens have always been guided by visions and prophecy. The reason they survived the Doom and came to Westeros in the first place was because of the vision of Rhaegar's ancestor Daenys the Dreamer. We see Daeron and Daemon Blackfyre having prophetic dreams in Dunk and Egg, and prophecy is the reason why Rhaegar was born. His parents, Aerys and Rhaella, got married because a witch said that the prince that was promised would be born of their line. The prince that was promised, or Azor Ahai, is a hero prophesied to be reborn and save the world from darkness, which seems to mean they'll fight the White Walkers. The prophecy's vague and complex, and people interpret it in different ways. Melisandre, for instance, thinks Stannis Baratheon is Azor Ahai, which doesn't work out, while others think Daenerys is the hero. Rhaegar was also into this prophecy, and it guided him from a very young age. As a boy, Rhaegar wasn't interested in playing with other kids, he just wanted to read books, until one day Rhaegar read about Azor Ahai and came to believe that he was the prophesied hero. So young Rhaegar went to the Master-at-Arms and said he needed a sword. "It seems I must be a warrior," he said. He talked about this in letters with his great-granduncle Maester Aemon. Aemon agreed that Rhaegar was Azor Ahai because, according to prophecy, Azor Ahai will be reborn amidst smoke and salt. They thought the smoke was from the fire that burned Summerhall when Rhaegar was born, and the salt was from the tears that were shed there. So Rhaegar was convinced that he was Azor Ahai, and since Azor Ahai is described as a warrior of fire who will lead the fight against the dark, Rhaegar trained and became a great fighter. From a young age, Rhaegar was willing to shape his life around fulfilling the prophecy of Azor Ahai. But his beliefs about that prophecy later changed. Aemon says Rhaegar came to believe that Azor Ahai was not Rhaegar, but Rhaegar's son, Aegon, the baby he had with Elia. Because the prophecy says that Azor Ahai will be born beneath a bleeding star, and Rhaegar and Aemon thought that this star was a comet that was seen the night Aegon was conceived. This connects to a vision that Daenerys has in Book 2. She sees her brother Rhaegar and his wife Elia with their baby Aegon. Rhaegar says Aegon is the prince that was promised, and there must be one more. The dragon has 3 heads. It's not clear how the heads of the dragon relate to the prophecy of Azor Ahai, but the heads do connect to the symbolism of Rhaegar's family, the Targaryens, because their banner shows a dragon with 3 heads, which represents the 3 siblings who led the house 300 years ago, Aegon, Rhaenys, and Visenya. As Daenerys points out, these names connect to the names of Rhaegar's children, Aegon and Rhaenys. So when Rhaegar says there must be one more, it sounds like Rhaegar wants a 3rd child called Visenya to complete the set of the dragon with 3 heads. But there was a problem, because Rhaegar's wife Elia was always frail and sickly, and after giving birth to Aegon, she couldn't bear any more children. So, if Rhaegar believed there must be one more, he'd need another woman to produce his 3rd child. And that is where Lyanna Stark comes in. It seems likely that part of the reason why Rhaegar ran off with Lyanna and fathered Jon Snow was that he wanted a third child to fit the three heads of the dragon. If he was planning for a daughter called Visenya to fit Aegon's sisters, that didn't work out, but he might have changed his mind about Aegon and decided that this third child, Jon, would be Azor Ahai. Because Rhaegar says that Azor Ahai is connected to something called the Song of Ice and Fire, which happens to be the title of the book series. Lyanna Stark of Winterfell is connected to ice, and Rhaegar of the Targaryen Dragon Lords is connected to fire. So a child of Lyanna and Rhaegar would be a song or a son of ice and fire. There are many hints in the books that Jon may be Azor Ahai. Melisandre prays for a glimpse of Azor Ahai, and her god shows her Jon. There's smoke and salt and a bloody star on the scene where Jon dies, and Ned promised to protect Jon, making Jon a prince that was literally promised. So Jon, not Aegon or Rhaegar, may be the true hero. It might have been Lyanna who realized this in the end. Maybe she named Jon Aegon in the show. What better name for the prince that was promised? So it seems that in the end, Rhaegar achieved his goal. His actions with Lyanna led to the birth of Jon, who may be the hero who'll save the world. But does that really justify Rhaegar's actions? Couldn't he find a way to father Jon without abandoning his family and causing a war that killed thousands? How could he be certain that taking Lyanna was the only way? Vague prophecy seems like a convenient excuse for Rhaegar to do things that he probably wanted to do anyway, like ignoring difficult political realities, running away from his problems, and shacking up with a teenager. Because remember, Lyanna was just 15 in the books, while Rhaegar was a 20-something-year-old prince. You can imagine his pitch to her, like, hey, I'm married and you're engaged, but if we don't bang, the world will literally end. And did I mention I play the harp? And he takes her away to this tower he calls the Tower of Joy, and they sit around making prophecy babies for like a year. Meanwhile, the world is burning. Are these really the actions of a hero trying to save the world? Or was Rhaegar just a selfish idiot who killed thousands because he was thinking with his dick? There is one theory that ties things together in a way that could justify all of Rhaegar's actions, including the war and the deaths. Because part of the prophecy of Azor Ahai is that the hero will have a burning sword called Lightbringer. In Book 2, we're told a story of how the original sword was forged. Apparently, Azor Ahai tried 3 times. The first sword broke when he tempered it in water. The second sword broke when he tempered it by stabbing the heart of a lion. But the third sword he tempered by stabbing the heart of his beloved wife. She cried with anguish and ecstasy and died, but her strength went into the steel. And that is how the true Lightbringer was forged and the world was saved. Some readers have noticed that this story kind of mirrors the story of Rhaegar. Like Azor Ahai, he tried 3 times to fulfill prophecy. First, he believed that he himself was Azor Ahai, but he ended up dying in the waters of the River Trident. Second, Rhaegar believed that his son Aegon would be Azor Ahai, but Aegon was killed in the war by the men of the Lion of Lannister, Tywin. The third and final time, Rhaegar made a child with his beloved wife Lyanna. He plunged his sword into her, conceiving Jon, and she died in childbirth. So the first sword broke in water is Rhaegar, the second sword broke with a lion is Aegon, and the third sword, the true Lightbringer, forged with the death of a beloved wife, is Jon Snow, the sword in the darkness, the light that brings the dawn. So while Jon is the weapon who'll beat the White Walkers, the actual hero Azor Ahai is Rhaegar, dead years before the story even starts. This theory suggests that each of these deaths, everything that happened, was necessary, predestined to save the world. Lyanna needed to die in childbirth, Aegon needed to die in the war, and Rhaegar needed to die at the Trident. Maybe he knew. Maybe Rhaegar saw this stuff in dreams like his Targaryen ancestors did, and part of him knew that his fate was to die and cause the deaths of everyone he loved. And that's why he could never be happy, never be known or fully love or explain himself to anyone. That was his melancholy, his sense of doom. Maybe his is the song of ice and fire. And from the beginning, he knew how it ends. That's one theory anyway. There's still lots that we don't know about Rhaegar's goals, the politics, prophecy, heads of the dragon, and about Lyanna and Elia. Like, how did Elia feel about her husband running off with another woman? Was she in on the prophecy stuff? And how much did Lyanna know? Between Lyanna and Elia and Rhaegar's mother, Rhaella, there are a lot of women in this story whose only role is to be pretty, give birth, then die. We know almost nothing about them, so it'd be nice to learn some more about their stories. What is clear is that Rhaegar and his legacy are tied to the fate of Westeros, and will keep seeing his influence until the end. AltShiftX now has a website at altshiftx.tv. We made it with our sponsor Squarespace, which is an amazingly quick and easy way to make a beautiful website. There's no mucking around with HTML or XML and patches and updates. You just choose your domain name, pick a nice template, customize it how you like, and you got a website. So if you've got a project or a business or a theory about how the mountain is actually Podrick on Hot Pie's shoulders, make it happen using squarespace.com/altshiftx for 10% off your site. The link's below. Thanks for watching. Lots of the ideas in this video are from the Game of Thrones community online, so check out the posts and essays linked below. Thanks to the patrons, including Dylan Geekazoid, Ksenia Kalanina, Thor Alexander Almirlid, Leia Blaze, Fairy Queen, Espen Björk, Simon Pollock, Rain de Prince, David Oakland, and Black Clover. Cheers.